Well, welcome everybody to this special interview with Dr. Kate Middleton, where we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the issue of anxiety and fear. Dr. Kate has been a friend of Kingsgate for a number of years, and we're so grateful to her for the time that she invests at Kingsgate. If you didn't catch her talk, which was done on Sunday, the 23rd of January 2022, then I want to really encourage you to go and find that and listen to it. It's a good companion with today's interview. Dr. Kate comes with her psychologist heads on, and she's particularly interested in how our emotions affect us. She's a project leader for an organisation called Headstrong, which is a resource that's online looking at our well-being for young people. But she's also a director of the Mind and Soul Foundation. But of course, above all, we see her as author, we see her as speaker, and mother and wife. So we are in really safe hands today, and Kate really knows her stuff. So hi Kate, it's really, really great to see you, and thank you so much for coming online to dig a bit deeper into this topic of fear and anxiety. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Zia. It's really good to get to spend some extra bonus time with you today.
Yeah, wonderful. So we've got about an hour together just to see if we can dive a bit deeper into this topic. And, you know, personally, I'm hoping for some real tips on helping me with my anxiety and fear. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you want to pick up from your message on Sunday that you think we need to hear about today about anxiety and fear, so that'll sort of lead us into the other things we're going to talk about.
Sure. And anxiety is such a tricky topic, isn't it? Because it's not a pleasant emotion to feel, and it really triggers some deep instinctive, that urge to do something in us. And I think probably the biggest thing that we need to do when we're thinking about anxiety is try and flip the way we think about it. Instead of trying to think of it just as an illness and as something that we'd rather not have at all, even though that's probably the truth, honestly, but instead trying to think about how it's designed to work. What is the job anxiety is supposed to be doing in your brain? You know, it is a normal, healthy human emotion. We will all have to learn how to manage anxiety. And like I said in the talk from Sunday, you know, not just with the rubbish things in life, some of the best things in life will trigger anxiety. So it's not a flaw. It's not a sign that you're a failure. It's not some kind of lack of faith or something. It's just part of the way your mind works. So we can't try and eradicate it. And in fact, often that's what we do. We try and sort of push it down. And it becomes like trying to hold a beach ball under the water, doesn't it? You know, it just keeps popping back up. and then we start to feel more and more out of control, or it starts to feel like emotional whack-a-mole, because every time anxiety pops up, we just bash it down again. And that makes us even more anxious. So instead, what we've got to understand, when anxiety becomes difficult, why is that? When is that happening? Why is that happening? And how can we hold that better? You know, it's kind of like a smoke alarm. Do you have a smoke alarm in your house?
I do, yeah.
So the smoke alarm goes off. Now tell me, tricky question. Last time your smoke alarm went off, was your house burning down?
No, not at all.
That's good. I did once ask in a room full of like 1,000 people, I said to the whole room, last time your smoke alarm went off, was the house burning down? And somebody was like, yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm like, oh, awkward. But usually the answer is someone's cooking toast, or like my son tried to wedge an entire croissant in the toaster once, which just doesn't work. No. And the job of your smoke alarm is to warn you something might be happening and then get you to check it out. And most of the time it's a false alarm, and you have to just press the reset button or you know, waft your smoke alarm or whatever you do to get it to switch off. And anxiety is a little bit the same. Its job is to grab your attention, and that's why it's such a physical emotion. We feel it because it has to disrupt us if we were already absorbed in something else. So we get butterflies, that twitchy feeling. Then it sets us up physically in case we have to react. So you feel that adrenaline rush, your heart starts pounding, your blood sugar level goes up because you're ready to respond if you need to. And then it triggers your thinking mind to say, well, what's actually causing it? Is there anything we need to do? The problem often comes, like I said in the talk, when your brain thinks it's a real emergency.
Yeah.
So the flare of anxiety is so strong, or the situation is so potentially difficult, that instead of doing that, it pushes you into this emergency mode where actually your ability to think and analyze drops right down. And that rise of the physical change, that physical sensation and the emotional sort of urge of panic and overwhelm just feels so strong. And that's when we hit panic and dread and the sorts of forms of anxiety that are much harder to handle. And they are designed to be hard to ignore.
Yeah.
So understanding how and when you get pushed into that is really important.
Yeah. And I love that when you said about pressing the reset button, you know, your anxiety goes up. And then if you're able to step back and look at it and realize the truth of what you're seeing, is how you then reset that anxiety button so that it doesn't escalate into the 8s and the 9s that you were talking about. And I know one of the things you were talking about was about being able to take that moment, take that rest, and to step away from what's happening. And I'm just wondering if you've got any practical tips. You know, sometimes I think I'm doing that, but actually the reality is I'm not. I think I'm doing the right thing. And then when it doesn't work, I think, oh, well, that doesn't work. And so I'm just wondering what you're thinking there, some practical tips.
Yeah, definitely. And the interesting thing about anxiety is very often when people, they want to know how to handle it, they're struggling with it, it feels awful, it's limiting them, or it's stopping them doing stuff they want to do. All of the things that they want to know about are in the moment that it hits. And let's talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But interestingly, a lot of managing anxiety is about things you do the rest of the time.
Right.
Because you remember we talked about how anxiety is on the same physiological system that moderates your response to everything that life is demanding of you right now. Yeah. And so often what happens in people's stories when they talk to me is that life has been demanding, life has been tough, and maybe that's tough stuff, bereavement or change or family breakdown, or maybe it's really good things, but they've just been very demanding. So they've moved house or started a new job, gone to university, started a new school or college, those sorts of things. And then out of the blue, at the worst possible time, they suddenly start to struggle with anxiety. And there's this sense of, why has this happened? What's wrong with me? Help, I can't deal with this, on top of everything else. But actually it makes sense. If you think of your level on that system is a bit like the water level in a pool. Imagine I'm standing in a pool now. You know, when your overall level is low and the water level's like down by my feet, which you can't see, but they're there, you can handle like the waves of life, the little challenges that sort of wash over you because you've got loads of bandwidth. Yeah. But as your baseline rises, you get to this point, which is like a crisis point. And you're kind of living on the edge of that overwhelmed panic zone anyway, just because of the amount of stuff you're trying to juggle. And so then little triggers can push you into panic really easily. Yeah. And that's often where people are, where they've started to struggle with anxiety. They've got to the point where their brain is just wired all the time. It's constantly scanning the horizon for threat. You become in that space what's called hypervigilant. Right. So not only are you already quite tense, but your brain starts looking for trouble, basically. You know, at night when you hear a sound and the house is quiet and you're like, oh, what was that? And then suddenly you can hear every other sound that you would never. That's hypervigilance. Your brain becomes acutely aware of anything that could be risky. And so when you're on the edge of overwhelm and you get to that point, you're picking up all these little triggers, and each one could push you into a space where you're going to start to struggle.
So, okay, Kate, so I realise now why it's so important to be thinking about before you get to those 8 and 9. So talk to us about rest and how we do that well.
Yeah, and rest, in some ways you think it's really obvious, but actually it's surprisingly hard to do. So let me talk about 3 sort of top tips for rest. And we can link this as well to some of the biblical teaching. It's really interesting that right at the start, when humans are created and then later when we're given the commandments, rest it's a vital part of our rhythm, and it's something that's emphasized to us from the start. You know, we're created in God's image, and in the creation stories, God works for 6 days, but he rests on the 7th. And that pattern of work and rest is really, really important. And when we're first given the Sabbath commandment, which is a commandment about worship and not forgetting to take time out to spend with God, but it's also about rest. The rest that we're commanded, the Hebrew word that's used, I mean, literally it means lie down. There's something about physical rest that's really important. Okay. That is about just taking a break, recharging your body. And it's really interesting, that physiological system that anxiety sits on. We know that things like sleep, things like physical rest, you know, lying down, reading a book, taking a hot bath, the things that physically relax us, they drop your level on that physiological system. And there's something about the value of the rhythm of that. So sleep, for example, a regular sleep where every night your level just drops down, so you're ready to start the day again. Once those things get disrupted, stress and anxiety very quickly become a problem. And it's tough, isn't it? Because when we've got a lot on, we struggle to switch off and sleep really well. So think about, how do you do physical rest? What does that look like outside of sleep? So like I say, the hot baths, the things that are physically relaxing. If you need some help with that, think about things that help you physically relax, you know, a massage, go sit in a hot tub. Lots of people have got them these days, whatever, just a bath. If not, you know, that's all we've got, but it works well. Whatever works, do those things. You know, they talk about the art of hygge, don't they? That thing of setting up a really comfortable, snuggly space. And that often helps people to rest. But don't forget sleep. So often in our 21st century culture, sleep is something people struggle with, and we do need to prioritize it. And I know there's loads of reasons people struggle with sleep. But do you know the number one reason people don't get enough sleep?
No.
It's procrastination. I mean, I'm just the same. I intend to get an early night. I'm absolutely convinced. And then I get absorbed in some crazy TV program, or, you know, I start pottering around, and before I know it, it's midnight and I'm still up. Actually prioritizing it and thinking, no, I'm going to really be careful. And maybe doing that for a season and trying to practice getting into a rhythm of sleep. And it's not just when you go to bed. Very few people's brains just switch off just like that. Most people need to ease into sleep. So think about your sleep routine. I love to read. I always go to bed like half an hour at least before I will go to sleep. And I read for a bit. Sometimes I'll take a cup of tea, decaf, obviously, up, and I'll drink that whilst I'm reading. But I do it so regularly, my brain knows that's like its cue, it's the warning to prepare for sleep, because it's something I always do as part of my bedtime routine. And that will help you teach your brain that this is about letting go of the day, switching off, starting to ease into sleep. If you do struggle to let go, you've got one of those very buzzy brains, maybe do something really intentional. Before you go upstairs to bed, get a journal or just your diary, or open your laptop and note down, like, what's all the stuff in your head? What do you need to remember? Is there stuff for tomorrow? Try and get it out of your head and onto the paper or the screen. Then close the screen or shut the book, leave it downstairs and go up. It's a very important cue to your brain that it's like saying, it's okay, you can let go of this now. And then, so sleep is really important. And if you are struggling, chat to your GP, get some support, get some advice, because it really does make a big difference.
I'm interested what you were saying there about get out your laptop, because actually I got caught out with that last night. I was in a late night call doing Zoom, and I've discovered about myself, I really need to not be using something like that too close to sleep. So it was 11 o'clock last night that I'm still buzzing because I didn't come offline till 9:15, and really got caught out. But I've just learned something about myself, about that rhythm of, no, these are the things that stop me sleeping, so let's not do those.
Definitely. And some people are more susceptible to that stuff than others.
Okay.
So there is some interesting physiology behind some of that we have cells in the back of our eyes that are directly linked to the part of our brain that controls the sleep-wake cycle. And when we're using particularly backlit devices, and there's some science that suggests that the sort of blue lit devices, like these wonderful phones like I've got here, are particularly good at this. They basically shine light right at those cells. And so for people who are susceptible, it's a bit like your brain thinks it might be dawn and it just gets confused. Is it morning? Is it evening? It's not sure. And generally anything we can do to be working with our natural rhythms instead of against them that's a good thing to do if you're struggling with sleep. So that's why they say always go to bed at roughly the same time, get up at roughly the same time. Your brain and even your body, your hormone levels have a natural cycle through the day and the night that helps you prepare for sleep at bedtime and hopefully feel vaguely awake at getting up time. And so working with those things, yes, trying to avoid backlit devices for at least an hour or so before you go to bed. Some people really find that makes a difference. And I think the other thing is just the sort of psychological cues that, like I say, tell your brain it can let go, whether that's work or just the buzz of conversation and social media. And I know this is a problem for a lot of younger people, young adults. So, sorry for mentioning it. But if you know that you're always like, oh, I wonder, oh, buzz, there goes, my Instagram feed, whatever. Plug your phone in downstairs when you go to bed. And I know you might miss something, but sleep really matters. Yeah. Particularly in those tough times. So sometimes we have to put some careful boundaries around it. So that's number one, would be sleep and physical rest. Number two is about a slightly different question of what rest is. And it's really interesting. There's this, it's right from the start when the commandment to rest and do Sabbath is given. It's repeated again and again and again and again. It's like God knows human beings are always going to forget this one. We're always going to push the limits. We're always going to need reminding. Yeah. And so again and again, it's like, don't forget to Sabbath. You still need to Sabbath. And there's this moment in Exodus 34 when they're talking about times of harvest, times when people are really busy. And there's such a sense then to think, well, maybe now I don't have time to rest. I'll just have to take a holiday when this is over. But actually what the Bible says there is that particularly in those times, it's really important to build in rhythms of rest. What's very interesting is it uses a slightly different Hebrew word. And the Hebrew word used then literally means, wait for it, stop. It's almost a legal word. It's like desist. Right. And basically what we're saying is when you're really busy, your rest needs to be about getting away from whatever is relentless in that moment. Now, that may be physical demand, but I would suggest that very often it's something mental. It's cognitive demand. You're just really busy. You're studying for exams, or you've got lots of worries. You're caring for children and elderly parents and all the things that you're trying to think of. What does it mean for you to get away from whatever is relentless to you right now? Brilliant. And that's a very interesting question where we are coming out of pandemic as well. Some people are exhausted because of the demand that they've been under. For other people, what they need to get away from and rest from is isolation, quiet, loneliness. They've been shielding for 2 years and just the silence of an empty house is just exhausting. So think about, what do you need to get away from? What needs to stop? How do you give your brain a rest from whatever has been beating it throughout this season for you? And so thinking about mental rest and what it means to get away from things is another really good question.
Yeah, I love that sense of stop. You know, our propensity is to just, I haven't got time to stop. I've got to keep going. But if we just take the time to stop, we'd actually probably be more effective later on. We need that moment. Love that. What's your third one, Kate? You said there were three.
I think with the stop and the mental rest as well, sometimes we need to be clever, because when your brain's really buzzy, and some people's brains are like that anyway, you actually need to find something to do that's rest, that sort of engages your brain enough. Because otherwise those sorts of people, I'm married to one of those sorts of people, and I know what he does. He just sits there worrying about all the things he should be worrying about. So we have to think of different things. We have to find a really good box set and that you can absorb yourself in, or try and, this would push me over an edge personally, but some people love puzzles or things that are like mentally engaging enough, but also quite relaxing, quite empty space, or playing an instrument, stuff like that. So if you know that's you, think about, what can I do that engages my mind, but is a break? It does stop the relentless stuff. but just sort of distracts it onto something else enough that then I can physically rest as well. So you have to think about that and be quite clever. And I guess, my number 3 is just changing the way that we think about rest, because so often the problem is we just feel guilty, don't we? I'm a mum. My elderly mum lives locally. I have lots of friends who need me. There's loads of stuff I should be doing. I'm also trying to, get some exercise in and do my household chores. And oh my goodness, it can feel like if I'm sitting doing nothing, that's basically either really indulgent or it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I love the story that you see in Mark 6. It's another moment in the life of Jesus and the disciples. It's actually the same one that I was talking about in the sermon on Sunday, although it's recorded in a different gospel. And it's this really busy day and they've had some bad news. And Jesus says, you need to come away with me and we need to go somewhere quiet and get some rest. But the word that he uses for rest is this word. It's really interesting. What it means is to complete something by pausing.
Oh, wow.
Which feels like a contradiction. And I love that way of recognizing that actually rest isn't indulgence or time wasted. Rest seals the deal. It completes the cycle of work and rest. You're not done with your work until you've rested as well. Brilliant. And so recognizing that we complete the things that we're called to do or that we need to do, the responsibilities we have, we complete that by resting. Otherwise, it's unfinished. And I find for people who are very motivated, that really helps if you can just change the way you think about rest, thinking, I have worked so hard this week. It's Friday night now. How do I complete this week really well by resting? Yeah. And I think that change of mindset can often really help people.
Do you know, Kate, I think there's some people out there who really needed to hear, I give you the permission to rest well, and you don't need to feel the guilt cycle going on. Actually, this is the kindest thing you can do for the other people around you. It isn't indulgent for you. It's a little bit like, putting your mask on first before helping everybody else.
Definitely.
So just thank you, because I know for so many people, just to hear you say that will settle something in their hearts about feeling guilty about that. So that's absolutely amazing. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So anything else you want to say there on those 3 tips those 3 areas of what it looks like to rest well?
No, I think the trick is just to be creative. And as you say, to get away from guilt, but also to plan where you can. And with rest, if we leave it and try and slot it into our diaries last, the reality is it probably won't happen.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is prioritize it. And I talked on Sunday about stepping stones. And that's really important with rest, thinking, when's my next moment to pause? Yeah. Remember, I talked about practicing peace. When can I next do something that I know is about intentionally dropping that physiological stress level, just relaxing, taking a moment for me, like you say, looking after my own well-being so that I can support all the other people that I support. Yeah. I think thinking about that routine and trying to get that to become not just random little dots of, oh, thank goodness I've managed to do something this week, but a practice that's part of our intentionality in the way that we do life. It's not easy. So please don't hear me saying, oh, it's really simple. But I think just working at it and prioritizing it without feeling guilty and it just becoming another thing we beat ourselves up for. Yeah.
And diarising, I think that's really,
I think that's the trick. And the hardest, of course, is people whose lives are unpredictable, who do shift work or their patterns change every week, because you can't get into that rhythm. So, but if you can, or even if there's just one thing you can put every week in, start small. It's easier to start small and succeed than to have really lofty ambitions and then get nowhere near them. So just think, start small. What's one thing you could do and make that a really regular practice?
Yeah, I love that. I think if I went for something big, I'd just feel a failure because I didn't manage to hit all the goals. I'm very goal orientated. So that's really nice and small. Feel the feeling of success. I love that. So all the way along, sometimes you've talked about the physiological effect on us and some of these chemicals that are running around in our body. And I've heard this endorphins, Kate. What are they? How do they help me? Can you just tell me a bit more about that?
And endorphins, it became one of my favorite sayings through the pandemic, saying endorphins are your friend. I used to go on about it a lot, to the degree that my children will still repeat that parrot fashion occasionally. But endorphins are like your brain's happy hormones. And their job is actually that they're released in moments of emergency, or if you've had an injury, or if there's a real crisis. And what they do is they calm you down and they help you to think more clearly. They drop your stress level so you can respond well. And you'll hear people sometimes describing what is the impact of endorphins, say if they've had a car accident, and they'll say, like, it's really weird, I felt really calm, it didn't hit me till later, they'll say. And that is the impact of endorphins, like in their crisis management mode. They're really amazing and really quite powerful in terms of the effect they have. But they're also released in good spaces as well. And we can harness the impact of endorphins to help us in times when life is being really challenging, because they drop your stress level, they help you calm, they're brilliant for helping switch off before trying to sleep or relax. They also lift your mood and raise your motivation if you're just feeling really flat and full of despair. So they're a good thing, again, to think about how can you build them in. And on the days when you feel really rough, sometimes doing something that won't change anything of all the things that you're struggling with, but will give you a little bit of an endorphin boost. It's a good strategy just to help you. So there's basically 3 things that we can do to trigger endorphins. Number 1 is exercise. Everyone's like, oh no, exercise. But I don't mean you have to like run a triathlon or something. We're so full on with exercise now. Everybody's like doing these amazing things. Think much, much smaller. So you could just go for a walk. Maybe if you like a bit of a jog, do that, or a ride, drag your bike out, dust it down, or whatever you enjoy doing. And what you have to do is about 30 minutes, enough to raise a little bit of a sweat. Or I often say to people, if you're carrying a coffee because you've gone for a walk with a friend and you're not slightly at risk of spilling it, you're probably not quite working hard enough. So it's a little bit more than just ambling around your local park. It's a bit of a power walk, but it doesn't need to be like full Lycra 6-hour, hike. So again, just try and be a bit more easy on you. So often we have these lofty ambitions and we just think, well, if I can't do the full 6-hour hike, then what's the point? But there's loads of points. So think small, get out, walk around the block for half an hour. Next time you've got to phone your mum or your dad or whatever it is you've got to do, take your phone and get out walking while you do it. You've killed 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, and gained a bit of an endorphin rush at the same time. So think practical. So that's number 1. Number 2 is connection with people. Our brains are designed to thrive off human connection. Again, it's one of the things we see in the Genesis account. It's not good for us to be alone, to be separated. And gosh, in this season, we have been so separated. So thinking about that, like I said on Sunday, the anchor people in your life, the people who are most important, the people who really get you, you can really be yourself with them and they understand you and you don't feel like you have to spend ages explaining the weird sort of intricacies of your mind to them. They just know how you think and feel. Hanging out with those people will trigger endorphins. So again, make time for it, because they're probably the people who you often don't see a lot, because you can go weeks and then phone them up and it'll be like you never missed missed the start. But actually they are also the people you'd probably benefit most from regular diary time with. So like a weekly coffee. My husband and I have started doing a weekly coffee because we realized we were just getting the dregs of each other. Like if we ever had time to catch up at the end of the day, it was just like who could manage not to fall asleep. It was ridiculous. So we are now doing a regular coffee on a weekday morning because he's working from home more and it kind of works in this season. But maybe you need to do that with a spouse, partner, best friend, relative, whatever it is. Think about when can you do that, and again, can you make it regular, because it will really help your mind to know that's coming. And it's amazing how much it helps you in one of life's rogue moments to know that like later in the week you've got one of those stepping stone conversations with someone. You can just think, oh yeah, I'm so gonna like just debrief on that when I meet up with this person on Thursday, or it'll be so nice to be able to tell them about that on Thursday. And when your brain knows that's coming, it means that it can use it as part of its support system. So that's connecting with people. And number 3 is just fun, which should be really obvious and easy, but the last 2 years haven't been super fun. And I also think a lot of people will identify with that season in life where actually your responsibility level is really high and your time is super pressed, and even outside of pandemic, I think it can become harder than you think just to have fun. You know, there's an American, a Canadian, sorry, pastor who I know you guys know a little bit, called Carrie Newhoff. And I remember being at a conference once, I think it might even have been at Kingsgate, where he said to the room, he said, "When did you last laugh?"
Yeah.
Like really belly laugh.
Yeah.
And there was this awkward silence. And I was amongst people going, "Oh my goodness. That is so true. I cannot remember the last time I just really laughed." And often that comes with the connection with friends. Yeah. But so just think about, what do you do for fun? It'll also help you relax. It'll trigger more endorphins. It will give you that boost. It's so, so important that we have fun. Yeah, we were designed to enjoy life, but sometimes it does get a bit relentless, and we shouldn't feel bad and guilty about that. That's the reality of life. But in those moments particularly, I love the Nehemiah verse that says that the joy of the Lord is your strength. The Hebrew word means it's your fortress. It's a place of protection. It's something you can retreat to in the stormy times or the battle times of life. Yeah. And if you know things that, no matter how rubbish everything else is, will always make you smile, those things can get you through in a rough week. Yeah. You know, I love to cycle. And in some of the rough times of the pandemic, I mean, so grateful I was still able to bike. But there's a couple of routes I do with hills, and go to the top of a hill, cycle down it really fast. And I don't care what else is happening in life, that always makes me smile, always makes me feel better. So what are those things for you? Yeah. And in the rough times, how can you retreat to those things?
Oh. I get the bit about cycling, Kate. Simon and I are tandem riders, so we get to the top of the hill and we battle together. But when we go down the hill, man, they go really fast. So it's really great. And I
like going up the hills too, but I find my family and friends are a little bit less easily convinced with the uphill bits.
Well, that's how the tandem. That's how we ended up with the tandem, because he has to take me with him. He can't leave me at the bottom of the hill, you see. But I love that thought about our friends and meeting with our friends and meeting with people, because so often, I mean, I know people say to me, "Oh, Zia, you're so busy," but actually I am, but I do benefit from people breaking in, and I think and saying, please come and, have a coffee, and because actually they're doing me a favour as well. So I think sometimes we might hold back thinking, oh, people they're too busy for me, but actually it is a reciprocated thing, and actually we're doing each other a favour, and saying to each other, come on, give each other permission, stop, have a coffee, process life, have some fun, have a laugh, because it will benefit us both. So
and I think in the pandemic as well, a lot of those friendships did sort of get lost a bit in the madness of what was happening. And there was something, it was actually a French psychologist who coined the phrase, talked about friendship funneling, which I really like. It was the idea that everybody basically narrowed their social lives down because it took such effort to maintain social connection. And for some people, because there were a lot of people relying on them, basically when at its hardest, so in the last year or so, they got to the point of really only connecting with the people in their household or the people who were dependent on them. And if you're one of those people, or if you had a friend who suddenly just dropped off the planet, I think we've got to be honest, sometimes there's a bit of hurt there. That's felt difficult. Why weren't people there for me? Why didn't people reach out to me? Where did this person go? But maybe now is a good moment to try and reconnect. And to try and think, actually, this was a unique, crazy moment, and it was really tough. I think when we're really struggling and we're in that overwhelmed zone, we become so sort of just head down. What does it take to survive today? We're not good at thinking longer term and thinking, actually, I must schedule this and plan this. And so things did get lost. And that's just human. Nobody meant anything bad from it. It was just lots of people trying to do what they had to do to get through a rubbish winter a year or so ago. But now maybe there is a moment of thinking, do you know what, I haven't seen this person for 18 months and actually I really miss them, and wouldn't it be good to pick something up and maybe look at what does it mean to schedule something more regular, and maybe as part of that we'll have to have some difficult conversations. But if we value those connections enough, it'll be worth it. And probably there's a process for many of us of letting go of some hurt and just recognizing that in storms and chaos, sometimes things don't go the way that we would have hoped that they would, or the way that we'd wished that we could have done them. And just letting that go and being able to start afresh with people who we love.
Yeah, and extending that graciousness to ourselves and to those around us.
Definitely.
None of us got it right during the pandemic, and I love that bit. There will be some hurt, and it is good to stop and go, maybe this is the time to reconnect and rebuild some bridges. I love that. You know, Kate, I am so aware that time's disappearing. I could spend forever with you, and just wondering if there are any quick wins that you could just talk about. Quick ones, you know, your anxiety's rising. What do I do? What's a quick win for me?
That's so good. And I did promise we would talk this. So we talked about how to keep your baseline lower, dropping the level the rest of the time. But what do you do in those moments where it flares up? You can feel the panic. So the first thing to do is to recognize that that's happening and call it out. So just thinking, whoa, I am in that zone. You might find it helpful to actually pause and say, what number, if you think on that 0 to 10, what number am I? Oh my goodness, I'm number 9. Oh God, no wonder I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I'm actually at 9. And then recognize if you're in that overwhelm zone, usually about 8 to 10. Some people find 7 is iffy as well. But your ability to think clearly will drop. Remember what I said about binary thinking? It starts to feel like the world is very one thing or another. So you're either good or bad, succeeding or failing. People are either for you or against you, and it often feels like the worst of all of those things. So if you do that, what number am I, and you recognize that you're in that place, realize things probably aren't as bad as they feel. And that's hard, but to say actually it feels utterly overwhelming and hopeless and dark right now, but it probably isn't. That's the first step. And then doing something just to try and drop your level. It's like pulling the plug out of that water tank, so it just drops down so you can get a breath, you know. And breath is actually a really good way of doing that, funnily enough. It's a sort of physiological trick that when we breathe, it helps regulate the sort of level on that stress system, the stress and anxiety system. And it's much more complicated than this, but let's simplify it. Roughly speaking, when we breathe in, it dials it up, and when we breathe out, it dials it down. And that's partly because when you are anxious and stressed, what you do is your breathing starts to become very shallow. And what you're doing is keeping yourself sort of in the zone, hyped up, ready to go. You know, I can fight or I can fly, I can run away. I'm absolutely ready. So it sort of maintains the buzziness of that system. But we can deliberately counteract that by doing things that are about slowing our breathing down. And particularly taking nice, long exhales, breathing out slowly to harness the power it has to drop that physiological stress level. So there's 2 ways of doing this. Now, number 1 is to do with really intentionally focusing on your breathing and practicing something that deliberately changes how long you're in each cycle of the breath for. So there's in, there's holding your breath, and there's out. So there's something called 4-7-8 breathing. The actual
4-7-8 breathing.
The actual numbers don't matter too much, but roughly 4-7. What that means is you breathe in for a count of 4. You hold for a count of 7. So this is not like really slow, because you won't hold your breath for that long. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, that sort of pace. So hold it for 7, and then breathe out for a count of 8. So when I'm teaching this to kids, I often say, imagine you were at my birthday party. So I've got a lot of candles on my cake. Imagine you've got to blow long and slow enough to get all of them in one breath. Or imagine they're all lined up in a row and you've got to blow down. So it's a sort of sustained blowing out maneuver. So you can practice that. Do Google it. There's lots of things on YouTube that help you practice those lots of breathing techniques. So 4-7-8 breathing has been shown to be incredibly effective at dropping your physiological stress level in a moment. I use it quite a lot, actually. And what's great about it is if you're in a shared office or, you know, the station or wherever you are, no one can really tell that you're doing it. It's quite quiet. You can just grab a moment, hold, breathe out. It's not something you do for like half an hour. it's really quite hard work. I find 2 or 3 breaths are enough.
Okay.
It's also been shown to be really effective if you're struggling to sleep at night. Some people find it incredibly powerful for that. So it's worth practicing.
Right.
The only thing I would say about it is that some people, particularly if they're anxious, just find focusing on their breathing as a nightmare. It just makes them more breathless. If you struggle with panic attacks, often focusing on your breathing is just unhelpful because it can make that feel much worse.
Right.
And it's very, very hard to overrule that panic and do a really intentional breathing exercise like that one. So 2 things about that. Number 1, as I said on Sunday, practicing calm what needs to be instinct in chaos.
Yes.
So when you start learning a breathing exercise, most people's mistake is that they give it the first go in a really tough moment. But actually what you want to do is find a time in your week where you're super relaxed and you're somewhere very safe and quiet, and practice it then.
Yes.
And as you get better at it, so say you're practicing it when you're at like 0 to 3 on that 10 scale, as you get better at it, you'll then find you can use it in the sort of 4 to 6 zone. And then as you get better at it, you'll find it starts to become useful in the 7 zone and maybe even in the 8, 9, 10 zone. But if you jump in the first time you've ever done it and you're already at like 9.999 and you try and do a breathing exercise, I'm sorry, that's going to be very, very difficult. So think about when you practice and do practice being at peace, practice that. The more often you can do it, your brain will also associate it with feeling calm.
Yes.
So it has like a double positive effect. But there's another really good way to relax, which is simpler. So here's something I teach a lot. What you need to do is find a song that you love. And if it's got a really positive meaning to you, even better. So maybe it reminds you of someone really special, or maybe it's a worship song that focuses your mind on God or something like that. And put the song on, so stick it on your phone, or if you're at home, you can put it on the radio or whatever, and either sing along to it or even better, hum. And the reason humming is good is A, because if you're out on the street, it's a bit less loud and embarrassing. You can normally get away with a quiet hum without everyone noticing.
Yeah.
But also to hum, you have to breathe well to sort of sustain the note. And humming is slow breathing out. So you're not focusing on your breathing, but it is helping you breathe really well. And also, in the meantime, you're focusing not on your breathing, you're focusing on the song and the words and the meaning. And so as you hum along to that song, it will help drop your stress level.
Love it.
And again, the more you practice that, if you really struggle with anxiety, or particularly if you struggle with panic attacks, practice it in calm, the same song. Your mind will start to associate that song with calmness.
Yeah.
I do think if it's a worship song, if you bring a prayer element into that as well, there's a spiritual impact of the power. I have some go-to songs, and the power sometimes in low moments or moments where I just feel overwhelmed of sticking that song on and thinking, oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Like, come on, God's not going to let me down.
No.
You know, this is so what that I would say I think is an extra help. But some people I know really love just to choose a song that is meaningful for another reason.
Yeah.
But practice that in quiet, and you'll find that again, bit by bit, you find it will start to be helpful. As you feel panic rising, it's something you can go to try and bring yourself back to calm.
I love that. Doing something in the calm moments. So we practice in the calm so that we're ready for the chaos.
That's right.
I think that's just so powerful. And, you know, it's something, it goes back again, doesn't it, about dealing with what's below the 8 number. And, you know, in that time, these are the times to practice the things. Brilliant. Really love that. And I definitely think I've got a song in my mind that I know I hum along to. So brilliant, brilliant. So just thinking, I'm also a kids leader, Kate, at Kingsgate.
Right.
I have had a number of parents saying to me, kids are struggling, our 5-year-old's struggling, our 6-year-old's struggling, our 8-year-old's struggling, our 14-year-old's struggling. And I know you have a heart and passion as well for young people. And I'm just wondering, is there anything you just, as we finish up together, anything you would point our parents to and just say, these are little tips, or these are good resources I can point you to so that they're better equipped to help their kids at this moment?
Yeah, so there's a few great resources that will help you to have those conversations with kids. There's a great little book called Jesus and Emotions, which is from the guys at engageworship.org. So you can search for that. and that's for younger children.
Right.
And it's a beautifully designed resource that is about just helping you have conversations, not about when emotions are problematic, but just what are they? How do they feel? How do we manage them? So I love that. For older primary and teenage kids, definitely into secondary school, I would head to headstrong.uk, which is an online space that's actually designed for teens and young people.
Wow. Yeah.
But there is a wealth of information on there. There's quite a lot from me, but practical stuff, tips, videos, all kinds of stuff. Brilliant. There are several around anxiety. What is anxiety? How do we manage it? Breathing exercises, all of this stuff. And so parents can look through that material too, but they can also use it with young people to have these conversations about how do you manage things when they're difficult.
Oh, fabulous. Thanks such a lot. Well, thank you, Kate. Thanks for your time. Thanks for how you invest into Kingsgate. And we're just going to release you into the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been really lovely to chat.
Yeah. Bye, Kate.
Bye.